Welcome, students. Today we are going to be reading a book about remembering our heroes. This book is appropriate for Veterans Day or Memorial Day. American Heroes. The men and women of America's armed forces play many important roles. The armed forces, or military, protect and defend us from harm. They keep us safe. There are 5 branches or parts of the American Armed Forces. There is the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Coast Guard, and the Marine Corps. Each branch has jobs to do. The Army is trained for battles on land. The Air Force fights in the air. The Navy defends our waters. The Coast Guard protects our coasts. The Marine Corps serves on ships and on land. Some people serve full-time. Others serve in emergencies, such as hurricanes or earthquakes. Anyone who has served in the armed forces is called a veteran. This soldier gives a woman supplies after Hurricane Sandy. The 5 branches of the American Armed Forces. Once a year, we pay tribute to America's veterans. This is called Veterans Day. On this day, we honor all the men and women who have served in the American Armed Forces. Some people think Veterans Day is meant to honor only those who have died in war, but this is not true. There is a different day for remembering them. It is called Memorial Day. It is observed each year on the last Monday in May. Veterans Day is on November 11th. On this day, we show veterans that we are thankful for them. We are thankful that they keep our country safe. We tell them that we are grateful for their sacrifices. We express our appreciation for their service to our country. Sacrifices. Sacrifices are things you give up in order to do something else or to help someone. Veterans make many sacrifices. They give up seeing their family and friends. Sometimes they even give up their own lives. Vietnam War veterans honor veterans who gave their lives. This girl holds a sign to thank soldiers during a Veterans Day parade. These Girl Scouts talk to a veteran on Veterans Day. Armistice Day. The first Veterans Day was in 1954, but November 11th was still a special day before that year. That day used to be known as Armistice Day. This day celebrated the end of World War I. People around the world observed this day. World War I was a big war. Many of the world's nations fought one another. Many people were hurt and killed in this war. This is why people used to call it the Great War. The fighting lasted for 5 long years. In 1918, they asked for an armistice. This is an agreement to stop fighting. It gave leaders a chance to talk about how to end the war. They agreed to end the war on November 11th. American troops fight in France during World War I. 11. In 1918, World War I leaders agreed to end the fighting at 11 a.m. on November 11th. That was at the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month. World leaders signed a treaty to officially end the war in 1919. World War I was over. People around the world were relieved. It was the worst war the world had seen. People did not want to forget this day. They wanted to honor the sacrifices that so many had made. Great Britain and France called November 11th Remembrance Day. In Great Britain, people started wearing red poppies on Remembrance Day. This tradition began because of John McCrae. He was a doctor who had served in World War I. He cared for those who were hurt. He wrote a poem called "In Flanders Field." The poem talks about the many poppies growing on the dead soldiers' graves. These flowers are a symbol. They stood for sacrifice and hope. In France, people wore blue cornflowers, just like the red poppies. These flowers had outlived the war. They bloomed on the battlefields. Pictured is John McCrae. German troops march across Flanders, Belgium during World War I. People celebrate Remembrance Day in Paris, France in 1952. In America, there were parades. Leaders gave speeches. They spoke about the sacrifices made by those who had fought in the war. Workers were asked to stop working to honor these heroes. In 1921, America built a special tomb. The tomb honors America's fallen soldiers. It is located in Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. The tomb overlooks Washington, D.C. An unknown American soldier from World War I is buried in the tomb. Today, it is known as the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. To the west of the tomb, there are 3 graves. In the graves are unknown soldiers from World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. The tomb and graves help us remember those we have lost. They remind us of the people who gave their lives to keep our country safe. Pictured is President Bill Clinton lays a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. The tomb is made of white marble. It has 3 Greek figures on it that represent peace, victory, and valor. Veterans Day. People used to call World War I the war to end all wars. It was so severe they hoped that it would turn people away from war forever, but it did not. It was not long before another world war broke out. World War II was even worse than World War I. Raymond Weeks was a veteran. He had fought in World War II. He wanted to change Armistice Day to Veterans Day. He felt that all veterans should be honored. He wanted to make Veterans Day a national holiday. Other leaders thought this was a good idea. President Dwight Eisenhower did too. He was also a veteran. In 1954, he signed a bill that made Veterans Day a national holiday. Captioned, the U.S. entered World War II after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941. General Eisenhower speaks with soldiers during World War II. Pictured is a portrait of Dwight D. Eisenhower. In 1968, some American leaders wanted to make a few changes. They wanted to move certain holidays to Mondays. They liked the idea of making the holidays into 3-day weekends. They hoped that this would let more Americans enjoy them. So the leaders moved Veterans Day. They made it the last Monday in October. But many veterans did not like the change. They said that it changed the meaning of the holiday. Some states would not make the switch. President Gerald Ford agreed with the veterans, so he changed the law. In 1975, President Ford signed a bill that moved Veterans Day back to November 11th. Pictured are U.S. Navy sailors, President Ford. These people raised the American flag for Veterans Day in 1975. Americans still honor Veterans Day. Every November 11th, we remember those who fought in wars. The president lays flowers at the tomb of the unknown soldier. We watch parades and listen to speeches. Some schools take a day off. Others have special events for students. They listen to music, they talk to veterans, they learn about the armed forces. It is good to celebrate Veterans Day, and it is important to remember what the day is for. It is a day to thank those who have served in the armed forces. It is a day to honor their sacrifices. These students celebrate at a Veterans Day parade. Pictured are the U.S. Marine Corps. One veteran's story. Many men and women have served in the armed forces. Their sacrifices have helped all Americans. Their stories fill many books. This is one of their stories. It helps explain why these men and women deserve to be honored. Joseph Maxwell Cleland was born in Georgia in 1942. His family called him Max. They were patriotic. This means that they loved their country. Some of them had even fought in wars. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was shot and killed. The world was stunned. Some people were angry. Others were deeply saddened. Max watched the president's funeral on television. That is when he decided that he wanted to help his country. Pictured is Joseph Maxwell Cleland and President Kennedy. A president's funeral. On November 25, 1963, President Kennedy was laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery. Millions of people around the world watched the funeral on television. Max joined the Army. At that time, America was at war with Vietnam. Max volunteered to go to war in Vietnam. He became an Army leader. But in 1968, there was a bad accident. Just 1 month before he was to come home, Max was sent on his last mission. Max and 2 of his men flew up to the top of a hill to set up a radio. This would let American soldiers in different places talk to each other. But while he was on the mission, Max was hurt badly. He lost both of his legs and his right hand. Max was only 25 years old. He returned home. Over time, he healed from his injuries. Max knew he had to make a tough decision. He could do nothing, or he could do something to help himself and others. Meaningful medals. Max was awarded 2 medals. He was given the Silver Star and the Soldier's Medal for being brave in battle during the Vietnam War. Max, pictured right during the Vietnam War, soldiers board a helicopter during the Vietnam War. Max chose to serve his country at home. He became a leader in Georgia. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter asked Max to help other veterans. He asked him to lead the Veterans Administration. This is a group that helps veterans. There, Max set up a special program. It helped veterans get used to life back home after being in a war. In 1996, Max was elected to the United States Senate. This is a group that makes laws for our nation. He served Georgia in the nation's capital until 2002. Today, Max spends his time sharing his story with others. Max is a true American hero. Max speaks during a campaign stop. Barack and Michelle Obama walk with Max across the Normandy American Cemetery and Memorial. Remember our heroes. Our armed forces have been asked to serve our country many times. Each time, these brave men and women have been willing to help. They have fought in many wars. They have protected people in other countries. They have brought food and supplies to countries in need. They have protected Americans at home. They have helped during emergencies. Each year, we honor these men and women. Some have served in the past. Others serve today. All of them deserve our thanks. But you do not have to wait for Veterans Day. If you see veterans, be sure to tell them how grateful you are for their service. Members of different branches of the military take part in a Veterans Day parade. Two veterans shake hands. These kids thank a soldier. Share it! One way to honor veterans is to share their stories with others. You can learn a lot from a veteran. Ask your family to help you find a veteran. Ask the veteran to share his or her story with you. Then, share that story with your family and friends. A young girl visits a soldier. This Boy Scout is happy to show his badges to a veteran. Thank you for reading with me. Remember this Memorial Day or Veterans Day to honor those who have served. Thank you. Bye-bye.